African-American voters really have only been able to send one lawmaker, almost always a Democrat, to Congress. And the argument is that because of their percentage of the population and proclivity to vote for Democrats, they should have more voting power. And surprisingly, the Supreme Court voted in their favor in both cases. And so, again, the practical effect, it probably means two more House Democrats from Louisiana and Alabama, and in a narrowly divided House, every seat counts.
Welcome to The Debrief, where we talk with the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the headlines they're covering this week and where the story's going next. I'm Sarah Bedford, and I'm here with magazine editor David Mark. And David, the Supreme Court had several big rulings this week, but let's start with one about the independent state legislature theory. It ruled that invalid, and people are hailing that as a victory for elections, for democracy. Tell us about why that is.
Yeah, this is kind of a wonky case that usually just election nerds think about or discuss, but actually has widespread ramifications. It's basically a lawsuit brought suggesting that state legislators have ultimate power to decide how elections come down. Basically, state courts have no oversight of this. The practical effect of in a closely divided presidential race in states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, Nevada, on and on, elected officials could just impose who they wanted as president. And even the conservative Supreme Court was like, nah, that's not going to fly. There's no electoral oversight there. So this was kind of a step back from the brink. Interesting that it was a 6-3 decision in this conservative court.
And Democrats in Alabama and Louisiana also may have gotten a boost thanks to one of the Supreme Court's rulings this week. Why is that?
Yeah, these are long gestating rulings in a couple of these deep South states where there are significant black populations, but African-American voters really have only been able to send one lawmaker, almost always a Democrat, to Congress. And the argument is that because of their percentage of the population and proclivity to vote for Democrats, they should have more voting power. And surprisingly, the Supreme Court voted in their favor in both cases. And so, again, the practical effect, it probably means two more House Democrats from Louisiana and Alabama, and in a narrowly divided House, every seat counts.
And one of the definitely the biggest ruling that the Supreme Court made this week was about affirmative action and striking down the ability of colleges and universities to use race as an explicit admissions criteria. Tell us about that and how that's going over with folks.
Right. And while we never know what goes on behind closed doors in conference, it's almost hard to separate that case from the ones I was just discussing, which are very racially sensitive in many ways. The court at first seemed to effectively side with Democrats in a lot of ways. This time it's going much more on the conservative side. Not surprising at all that it was a 6-3 decision, specifically ruling out abolishing affirmative action at Harvard and University of North Carolina, a prominent private school and public university. And this is going to have widespread effect. Anybody who's been watching the court, though, could see where this was going. Reaction to date, fairly predictable. Republicans and conservatives are pretty happy about it. Democrats and liberals, quite the opposite.
Democrats and liberals had sort of taken a brief break from questioning the legitimacy of the court, right? Demanding it gets broken up or packed. Do you think we'll go back to that now after this ruling?
Just a few days ago, they were discussing how great the court was and the legitimacy almost can go day by day. And it goes in both directions, too.
Well, David, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
You can get more writing from David and the rest of the political team at washingtonexaminer.com.